Hello, everyone. This is Cameron Thompson of Home to Canine Dog Training and Hope to Canine Rescue, your host for Unleash Your Dog's Best. We have a really special person here today. I'm excited to chat with him, but before I get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about this event in case you're listening for the very first time. In this interview series, you will discover the secrets to understanding your dog, creating better behavior, and eliminating stress. Myself, along with a panel of fantastic experts, are sharing what it means to unlock the secrets to successful dog ownership, eliminating bad behaviors, and relieving stress that ultimately empowers dog owners to find freedom and peace of mind in their lives as a whole. Over and over again, this knowledge shows empowering dog owners to set better boundaries in their lives, make calmer, more calculated decisions, to just slow down and learn to listen more intently and not get stuck in past stories. I highly encourage you to listen to each call to get the most out of this free event. Every interview will be unique and valuable thanks to the diverse panel of experts. Each morning, we will send you an email with a link to the interviews of the day, so keep an eye out for those throughout the summit launch. All right, let's get started. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Ted Efthymiadis of Mango Dogs. He is absolutely consumed with rehabilitating aggressive dogs. Ted has been lucky enough to have trained with many of the highest level dog trainers in North America and has traveled North America many times honing his skills. Ted holds a constant client base, rehabilitating roughly 120 dogs a year. He also travels across Canada, holding seminars for other dog trainers. He's a busy guy since he also owns a website building company for dog trainers, and he produces DVDs to educate fellow dog owners. His dog training website company is called Pet Pro websites. Ted shares his life with his wife, Michelle, cute baby daughter, Athena, which I can attend to, and 3 incredible dogs, Mika, Dax, and BB. Ted lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and I so appreciate him being on the call today. Ted, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us for this interview series.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. You have incredible insight and experience to share around this issue, this topic really specifically of aggression, which is, really, really becoming, at least for a lot of us here, a bigger issue than ever before. And I'm really looking forward to you being able to share some insight as to why we're seeing more dogs struggle with these, this specific behavior display, and how owners can feel empowered to come from both sides of the coin, both prevent the issue in their younger dog as well as interrupt, stop, rehabilitate the issue in an established dog that they may have adopted or inherited. So really looking forward to your insight today, and I know you've got some great stuff kind of planned and articulated. I'd love to start out if you could share just a little bit about your story, your background. How did you end up doing this really important work?
So it started about 12 years ago. I adopted my first dog from a local shelter. His name was Phoenix, and he was, if you ever heard the catchy phrase, you don't get the dog that you want, you get the dog that you need. He was definitely the dog that I needed at the time. He had a lot of behavior problems, some aggression issues, and unfortunately at the time, we didn't really have many or any really trainers in the area that were kind of qualified or were working with dogs with such issues. So I really struggled and stumbled with him, went to a local trainer that convinced me that he could help. It ended up not working out as planned. And so really I just set off on this really long journey of 2 years of figuring out, just seeking as much knowledge and information from people as I possibly could, being extremely open-minded. And, when I got to the place with him where I felt like, wow, like he's a completely different dog, I can trust him, this is amazing. At the time I was working in the bike industry. I had a few companies, and I was getting ready to transition out of those. I was just feeling a little bit kind of bored and restricted, and I just wanted to do something different. And so I decided, well, heck, there must be other people that would be interested in this as well too. And lots of time and prayer led me to, okay, well, if I was having this problem and there was nobody fulfilling that service, then there must be a market for it. And so I did training, and I, started going to seminars and did all kinds of different things. And and basically just started putting it out there. I started to realize very, very quickly that like I had no idea that I was going to be working with aggressive dogs. I just figured, well, there's probably people with behavioral problems and want obedience training, and the vast majority of calls I would get would be for aggression. And people would just call me and say, hey, do you work with aggressive dogs? I'm like, I need money, so yes, I do work with aggressive dogs. And I was very authentic with people, saying, listen, I don't know, but if I can't help you, I'll give you your money back. And I just kind of figured those dogs out. Did that for a few years. Then met my mentor for many years, Duke Ferguson, who's also going to be in this series, and he really took me to a completely different level and just taught me just a completely different level, as well as other trainers. And so I just completely specialized, and I decided, okay, well, if people are contacting me from this, at many cases from around the world, there's a lack of knowledge and people that are willing to work with these dogs. I like a challenge. I like that not always knowing exactly what to do, constantly learning. So that's how I fell into it. The long and the short of it is I had a dog I needed help with. I had to kind of fix things on my own, and then I continued to try to hone my skills to provide a better, more effective service to be able to save as many dogs' lives as I possibly could.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, I think somewhere on your website that you say if it's possible to sort of fail your way into a career that you did that. And I think that's ultimately, it's funny, but it's the truth of what's actually really valuable about someone like yourself, because it means you've done the work. You've had the experiences over and over and over again to say, well, that wasn't successful. That wasn't the end all be all solution for that dog, or, it really gives you the upper hand when you've had a lot of experience in that regard.
One of the things I really love about being, like, having struggled so much with that dog is that with Phoenix, he taught me an extreme amount of patience, that these things don't happen overnight, and it really gave me a massive amount of empathy for the struggle that people are going through. Because just this morning I had somebody come in, and she had a dog, and she sat on my couch in my facility and just cried, and it's just such an emotional thing for people when they're struggling and they're in so much pain. And I get that pain because I've sat on the sidewalk with tears rolling down my face, just being so defeated. I know what that's all about, so I can easily connect with people that are struggling with their dogs because I've been there too.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly important for people to understand, that they're getting that in working with you, and that they should have that in any trainer that they engage with. It's somebody that really does understand being on that side of the equation. It's really powerful. Usually this part of the conversation sort of happens down the line, but I want to kind of take the opportunity real quickly with regard to that share and see if you can just, elaborate a little bit on all of those lessons that you learned by digging deep and deciding to figure that puzzle out with Phoenix, and how they've impacted other areas of your life. Because as I know you have experienced with clients many times, I see clients come in and they sit on, the couch, and they are broken down and weary and exhausted, and they don't think they can do it, or they don't think that the resolution exists, or it's that the change is possible. And yet I know that on the other side of making the decision to honor the individual dog and to honor where they need, to really make some changes in their lives and be the right owner for that dog, is this incredible evolution of empowerment beyond just the relationship with the dog, beyond fixing the dog's behavior problems. Can you attest to that in your own life as well? Has it impacted how you are in relationship with other people in your business? Like, do you see that correlation now, having all this great hindsight down the line?
100%. I just feel like when people are struggling and when people are beaten down, the worst possible thing that I can do is to continue to beat them down. And unfortunately, I've seen that many times with dog trainers is just expecting that people know things that they think that a dog owner should know. I come at it from a different perspective. I oftentimes will tell potential clients, it's okay that you're struggling with your dog for so many different reasons, but of course you're struggling with your dog. It's a different species. So it's, for me, I just come at it from a very non-judgmental way, and I feel like that's led itself into my life in some facets where I tend to be a lot less judgmental in other areas of my life with people that are coming into my life. For example, I know a lot of the dogs that I work with, they're struggling with, stressful things. Maybe they have food allergies. Maybe, the family just had a baby and the baby's up, in the night waking up the dog at the same time. There's all these layers of stress that some dogs are going through. And so, I see things kind of from the perspective of our dogs. And so it just gives me a little bit more, empathy to just walk people through it and say, this is normal that you're struggling with it. The lady who was in today, I remember when she started crying, I said, she was apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry. I'm just very emotional about it. I said, if you weren't crying, I would be shocked. And, you could just see a shift in her where she was like, oh, this is part of the process, It's that I have to go through this, and that sometimes going through those big things in life actually leads us to something really, really big. Another lesson that I've learned, as I said before, too, is patience. Now that I have a baby, I'm 1,000 times more patient, having worked with dogs that are trying to bite me and things like that. A crying baby is not such a big deal at the end of the day. So patience is a really big thing. And in the parenting realm, I find that it's really helped in the sense that because they're a different species, and I still don't completely understand everything that they do and exactly how they communicate, and I probably will never understand those things because I am a human and they are a dog. It just gives me a better sense for, with kids, like they communicate differently. They just do things differently sometimes, and that's okay. We don't have to have all of the answers, and that's a big lesson that I've learned is I don't need to have all of the answers, but I do need to have a game plan to go to follow through, and if things get sidetracked, then I need to have a plan B and a plan C and lots of tools and techniques in the toolbox so that if things don't go exactly according to plan, I can, take a different approach, and ultimately I'll get the result that I want.
Yeah, that's huge. Just process, huh? Really seeing the value of process and commitment, kind of problem solving, staying the course. Absolutely, I see that, from my own experience and with my clients as well. I think that's a really key ingredient for people to realize. It's if you're struggling, it's just a matter of process, and you need more tools. You just haven't found all the tools.
Another thing that I've learned recently that was, I guess I've been learning it for a while, but I find that a lot of cases when you're dealing with really bad cases of aggression or anxiety or something that's really, really overwhelming, a lot of times things they'll come to a head and they almost will not necessarily will get worse before they get better, but usually people are really close to a breakthrough right as things are the worst they've ever been. They're actually the closest to it. So if a client is struggling with something and they're thinking, oh my gosh, we've been working for a month and he's doing really well in these areas, but this is just not clicking for him, a lot of times I'll just say, listen, it's a process. It'll work. You're close. You just need to have faith that it's going to turn around. And sometimes it almost gets worse before it gets better. And I've seen many times where, they come in the next week and they're like, you were totally right. Something just shifted. So that's been a big thing I've been learning recently too.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's absolutely huge, and it'll bring a lot of encouragement, hopefully, to some of our listeners so that, that I've experienced that in many different areas, of my
Hmm.
life with regard to developing a business or, making
Sure.
huge shifts in personal development. I think that's just an absolutely, really key piece to share with people today. And I hope they'll really sort of marinate on that and write it down, that it's so common to be on the precipice of something really big and really, important and valuable in your life, whether it's the dog situation or something else. And it'll often feel like the most desperate moments right before you really get it. So
as long as you're doing something proactively to achieve that goal. Obviously, I'm not generalizing, saying, okay, just because your dog is like super overwhelming, it doesn't mean that it's just going to change tomorrow. Of course, you need to be doing something about it, and if you are doing something about it, stick with it, make some tweaks along the way if you need to, but obviously you have to be proactive rather than reactive, just expecting things to change.
Yeah, absolutely. So in along those lines, can I steer us in the direction of talking about, this issue of aggression? I feel like in starting that conversation, and you'll know better than I do here, I'm going to leave it up to you, but I feel like in starting that conversation, we really have to define it, right? And really help people to understand what is actually aggression, because it seems as though there's not a lot of clarity around this for dog owners, that aggressive behaviors are not necessarily aggression in terms of how you might go about treating it. But I would love to get this insight from you and hear how you can help, how you help owners sort of define what's my dog's actual motivation in the behavior that they're displaying. Is it aggression? How do we figure that out? And then how do we go after that in terms of an overhaul or rehabilitation piece?
So I've had to get really specific about terminology because, again, there's so many different thought patterns on what is aggression. So I've kind of had a little easy thing for people to remember. So there's a difference between what we call a reactive dog and an aggressive dog. And a reactive dog is barking, growling, lunging, etc., but they're not actually trying to hurt the other dog or the person, right? So if somebody calls me and they say, my dog got into a super nasty dog fight today, I need help, the first thing I ask them is, okay, how many stitches did the other dog need? The vast majority of the time they say, well, he didn't need any, but, they were barking at each other, they were standing up on their legs, their teeth were out, and it probably lasted about 2 minutes. The next thing I say is, well, that's 2 minutes where they easily could have made each other, bleed and need stitches, etc. So the fact of the matter is that most dogs that are deemed aggressive are not actually aggressive. They're struggling with things or they're reactive, but the intent is not to really damage or to harm. Now, the definition for me, at least, of aggression is a dog that is utilizing the symptoms of reactivity, barking, lunging, growling, that kind of stuff, but they're also actually in it to win it in the sense that they have a history of hurting other dogs, making them need stitches, biting people to the point where they needed, 5, 10, 15, 20 stitches. That's an aggressive dog. The dog desires to cause pain and those types of things. So it's really simple to draw a line in the sand and say, well, if your dog is hurting people or dogs, it's aggressive. If your dog has a lot of those symptoms but is not actually causing any of those same types of injuries, for example, your dog is probably more reactive, and then you can kind of figure out how to go from there. And then there's another little caveat that you could say, okay, within aggression, you can have dogs that bite and somebody will need a few stitches. And then you've also got extreme cases of aggression, like predatory aggression, where the dog is, more so aiming to kill. And that's a completely different level of intensity. And obviously you have to be super precautious and make sure you're utilizing muzzles in the training, etc.
Mm-hmm. So where do you begin in most of these cases when you determine you're dealing with a true aggression in a dog?
So the first thing I do is I actually get a massive amount of information from the client. So usually I would have people come in and I just sit them down and just talk to them, right? So how many dog fights has your dog had? How many of those fights resulted in the dog actually, hurting the other dog? The age of the dog, the breed of the dog gets kind of put into into the perspective, and then basically, depending on what's actually like the intensity of the situation, then we can figure out how to be able to go from there. And then you have to kind of like select as well too, okay, well, why is the dog being reactive or aggressive? Is the dog reacting because he or she is fearful, or are they doing it, as a way to, like a lot of people will say the dog thought its best defense was a good offense, or was the dog kind of coming at it from a different perspective? Were they actively seeking a fight? Were they not avoiding a fight? Or were they seeking a fight? So that for me is kind of one of the main things. The two main things that I really look at in assessing a dog is, number one, is the dog reactive or aggressive? Do I really need to watch myself? Because, what's the actual intent of the dog, right? Has it transitioned into actual aggression? And also at that point, just figuring out, like we talked about, figuring out the intensity and where it's coming from. Is the dog avoiding conflict and going into a situation thinking, oh my gosh, I growled at this dog, he won't leave me alone, and now I have to, run at him and try to fend him off, which would be obviously more of a fearful response? Or is the dog, just going completely out of its comfort zone to, run at somebody and bite them? For example, the dog that breaks through the front door, runs across the yard, and bites somebody across the street is clearly not a very fearful dog, right? He chose to do that, right? So understanding, is the dog fearful or more confident in their reactivity or aggression is something that needs to be figured out, because the protocols oftentimes are very different. A fearful dog is lacking confidence, so you tend to want to be doing a lot more confidence building. I do a lot of food-based training typically with these dogs, where the dog who has an excess of confidence is going to need a little bit more pressure, a little bit more rules, and that kind of stuff, and some correction to get them to understand, these aggressive outbursts will lead to these corrections. If you want to avoid those corrections, just don't be acting that way, and then we'll go from there.
Do you find that one is more common than the other, that dogs come in with more predominantly dealing with issues around fear or insecurity, or confidence, out of curiosity?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. I used to believe that the vast majority of reactivity and aggression was based in fear, until I started really sitting down and thinking about it. And then I came across this concept that just kind of came to me one day, because I've worked with protection dogs and sport dogs in the past. I started to realize that protection dog training is actually, it's taking a dog who lacks confidence and building confidence in them, right? So if you ever watch somebody who's training a dog in protection, what they do is they add like a tiny little bit of stress, and they show the dog that if the dog growls or, let's say, lunges or tries to bite or something like that, that the person is going to run away. So they take this tiny amount of fear, and basically what they do is they change it into confidence, where the dog decides, okay, I was a little bit scared about this person coming towards me, maybe looking at me in the eyes. I found it a little bit threatening. But if I acted this way, the person ran away. So what happens oftentimes is that aggression actually will almost always start in fear, not so much with predatory aggression, but most cases that I'm seeing, it starts in fear. And then the dog figures out that what they're doing to self-soothe by growling, barking, lunging actually gets the dogs or the people to move away. And so they generalize it and use it in other contexts. And basically what happens is that fear becomes overconfidence. So it might be a little bit difficult for people to understand that. Let me give you another scenario. So let's say somebody works, an 8-hour day. They leave the dog in the living room, and the mailman or woman comes to drop off some mail. So, they hear the little screeching of the mail coming through the slot or whatever, and the dog, kind of wakes up from its nap, and it growls, okay? And then maybe he or she runs over to the front window and sees there's a person walking away from them towards the road, okay? Now, what a lot of times will happen is the dog will think in their brain, I growled and that person went away from me, okay? So basically what will happen oftentimes is dogs will actually be starting in a fearful state. Oh my gosh, I just heard something, and it startles them. But then they see somebody walking away, and after a day, a week, a month, every time the person, comes to drop off the mail, it's now not just a growl, it's a bark, it's a flat out at the window, foaming at the mouth type of a reaction, because that little bit of fear worked hundreds or thousands of repetitions to build the dog's confidence, because every single time they barked, they growled, they lunged, the person walked away every time. The dog won every time. So that small amount of fear oftentimes can transition into a kind of an overconfident state, and this is one of the reasons why one of the things that I do personally with these types of dogs is I'm not inherently against using some level of correction with these dogs, because just because it was based in fear at some point, it doesn't mean that you can't use some level of correction or negative reinforcement or whatever to be able to get them under control, because it's not just fear anymore. They're self-soothing. They're seeking confidence. It makes them feel good about themselves to push people and dogs away. So a very long-winded way of saying, really, it usually starts in fear, transitions to overconfidence, and that's actually the most of what I'm seeing. I very rarely see dogs that come in that are just fearful dogs. I also very rarely see dogs come in that are extremely, for lack of a better word, dominant or predatory or anything like that. The vast majority of them are just dogs that figured out, when I act in this manner, people and dogs move away from me, and so they just do it thousands of times. Another context, people are walking down the road with their dog. Their dog starts to growl because they see another dog walking across the street. What happens? Every single time the dog growls, maybe the next time he lunges, maybe the next time he barks, whatever, every single time the dog who's walking across the street continues to walk away from him. So he or she thinks that they got that dog to go out of their space. And so the vast majority of dogs that come in are literally personal protection training themselves.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the owner's tendency, an impulse is oftentimes to have empathy for the dog, to come from, that emotional space of,
Sure.
of the dog is fearful, he's uncomfortable, he's making this choice out of feeling uncertain. How does that impact the dog's choice making moving forward when we have an owner in a position of, empathizing with them and maybe even trying to soothe the dog who is beginning to go down this path?
Well, one of my favorite kind of terms that I've heard from dog trainers that I just love is a lot of trainers will say, what you pet is what you get. So if your dog is anxious and you're petting them and you're trying to console them, it's not like a baby where it will make it better and it will soothe them. It typically will kind of intensify the state of mind that the dog is in. So a lot of times I will tell my clients, rather than being reactive and trying to soothe your dog when you think that he's uncomfortable, let's be proactive. Let's get them to do something beneficial, right? So get them to sit and look at you, or give them an alternate behavior rather than, trying to console them, because dogs don't console each other. It just doesn't happen. Like if you were to take a dog who's like a super stressed out dog and put it in a daycare with 50 well-balanced dogs, they won't go anywhere near it. It's toxic energy to them. They don't go over to that dog and make sure it's okay and offer to buy them a cupcake. That's just not how it works, right? They don't try to soothe them. They just go, okay, well, he's clearly going through something right now. He needs to go through this, and he needs to understand that we're not going to, try to get him to understand that he should be going through that. So for me, because so many of my clients are soothing their dogs when their dogs are dealing with, anxiety and stress and aggression and all these different things, I tell them, listen, it's not for you to soothe in that scenario. It's for you to walk them through and give them something better to focus on, because they're not going to get any better if you soothe them. They're just going to continue to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so important for people to hear, because a lot of owners feel like, well, my dog is uncomfortable, he's fearful, or he had a bad experience. That's a common one, right? He was attacked, or, when he was a puppy,
Sure.
he got bullied, and, I feel bad for him. And so the natural, response and impulse is actually a big part, it seems, of where owners are starting to dig themselves a deeper hole with that dog. And,
well, one of the things sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, please. You're fine.
One of the things I oftentimes do, I have a lot of different analogies. I always try to put things in the human perspective, so it helps them kind of understand a little bit more. So let's say there was a dog, and he was attacked by a dog when he was, walking through the park when he was 6 months old, and now he's 6 years old, and he's reacting aggressively towards every dog that he sees. I just put it in the human perspective. I say, okay, so that would be like somebody who was physically abused, or they were walking in the park when they were a kid, and, somebody attacked them and beat them up, and like in the human perspective, it would be like that person is now 30 years old, and they walk around in every neighborhood flashing their gun around saying, if you come anywhere near me within 100 feet of me, I'm going to shoot you. Like, that's not normal. People go through things that are stressful, and they learn how to cope with things and not generalize towards every single thing, right? And the vast majority of dogs that are overgeneralizing towards, okay, this happened to me one time, it's because a lot of owners have reiterated that they're not worthy of trust, in the sense that they didn't approach the situation properly, and then they consoled the dog by, unknowingly getting the dog to try to feel better, but they oftentimes just intensified the fear. And so when you look at it from the human perspective, it's like somebody that's assaulted and they're just walking around, threatening everybody that they see. Like, that's not normal. That's being way overprotective. Like, that's offensive for somebody to do that in the human perspective. And, dogs only do that kind of stuff because we can't let go of one thing that's happened to the dog, and, our stress is getting, put on the dogs. Like, worse things have happened in the world. You see these dogs who live on the street, and they get attacked all the time, and they still can get along great with all the members of their family, and they can walk by other members of packs just walking down the road, and they don't run around and try to attack other dogs. Like, some of these dogs have been through horrible traumatic things, and they're far more balanced than the vast majority of people who bring dogs into me.
Interesting. Yeah. Really, we get in our own way, it sounds like, very easily.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to make sure that we don't miss out on the opportunity to talk about this from that proactive and, more process-oriented place for folks that can plan ahead if they are bringing a new dog into their family. They're particularly starting with a younger puppy. What are some of the key ingredients that you can share from a prevention standpoint to making sure that they have the best chance at having a dog who is balanced and non-reactive and avoids ending up with aggression issues, and how much of that is within our control when we're raising a dog?
I think that it's like basically 100% within control, I wrote down a couple things that I wanted to note that could potentially help somebody in choosing their next dog. But the first thing I want to talk about is it don't just, like, you have to look at the dog in question, right? So don't think that because you may have had a dog in the past who was a German Shepherd who didn't require any training and he was super easygoing, that if you train your new German Shepherd like that, that the outcome is going to be exactly the same. Hopefully that's the case, and hopefully you don't have to do, switch things up, and that's obviously what we're desiring for everybody. But I know people that have, dogs, multiple dogs from the same breeder, and they're completely different. One was really bad at guarding their food, and the other one was like the easiest going dog in the world. And these are like, dogs that are like from the same breeder and the same mother. They're like half like sisters or brothers. So always focus on the dog that you have there. Don't focus on the dogs that you've owned in the past. Focus on the dog that you have. Just like parents would never, or I would hope, would never think, okay, well, I raised my first child this way, and my second child is not thriving with that same parenting. Well, I'm just going to keep doing it, and somehow, it's going to turn around. No, sometimes kids are just going to be different. They need a different approach to parenting, and same thing with dogs. So focus on the dog that you have there, not dogs that you had in the past, assuming that they're going to come along the same way, because it's not just in how you raise your dog. A lot of it is genetically based, and you need to be able to change your approach depending on the genetics and desires of the dog in front of you. So number 2, the vast majority of dogs that I have come in, people have decided they are under-socialized. And I've maybe seen a handful of under-socialized dogs in my opinion. The vast majority of dogs are overly socialized. And this is a really critical kind of thing to say. Not all socialization is beneficial. I'll say that again. Not all socialization is beneficial. The vast majority of my clients' dogs have brought me their dogs that are, let's say, dog reactive or aggressive, and they say, I can't understand it. I brought them to the dog park every day for the first year, and we're dealing with this aggression. It doesn't make sense. But to me, it does make sense because he probably got picked on, or maybe he figured out that he could pick on other dogs and that would make him feel better about himself, kind of a bullying type behavior. And so socializing your dog as much as you possibly can is almost always the wrong thing to do. You need to specifically be looking for the right dogs to socialize with. Balanced dogs. Find dogs that are humble, that understand, not to just rush up and be jumping all over each other. That's not normal interaction for predators to be doing. Like, that's chaos, right? And it often leads to fights. So socializing with the right types of animals. My daughter's only a year and a half old, but let's say she turns 5 years old and I take her to the playground. If there's another kid there that she's playing with and he or she starts stuffing sand down her throat, is that good socialization or bad socialization? Of course it's not good socialization. But why is it that we as a society have decided that, okay, well, dogs will be dogs, they'll figure it out? No, absolutely not. Some dogs, your dog should not be around. Number 3. People oftentimes do not give their dogs biologically appropriate activities. So to kind of break this down a little bit, what this means is if you go out and you get a specific breed that is known for being bred for a specific purpose, for example, if you have a border collie and you're asking yourself, I can't understand why every time I have a dinner party, he's rounding everybody up to be in the same room. Well, there's a reason for that. He's bred to do those types of things. If your border collie's, chasing cars, well, there's a reason for that. He's supposed to be doing something like that. So giving your dog something that's biologically appropriate to do, if you have a retriever, doing things with them, take them to the lake or to the ocean or to the pool, whatever you have access to, and, throw things in for them and have them do, drills of retrieving, giving them things to do. A bored dog is going to get into a lot of problems, and so you want to give your dogs things to do that are not, don't worry about what's fun for you to do. Do things that are fun for the dog to do. So I have a retriever, I also have 2 Belgian Malinois, and these dogs are specifically bred to bite. So what do I do with them? Well, I do protection work with them. I do bite work with them because it's their favorite thing in the world to do. Not giving them that is not being respectful of their genetics, and giving them that outlet is really critical in keeping them balanced and let them understand that biting in a certain context is actually a good thing to be doing, but you don't bite in any other context. So giving your dog biologically appropriate activities for the breed that they are is really important, and unfortunately a lot of people miss that and buy these obscure breeds that are bred for hunting like bears in Yugoslavia, and they need something to do that is specific to their genetics. Number 4, not noticing when fear becomes that confidence, right? We talked about this before, fear shifting into confidence, like really, has your dog's life been that, terrible that they should be running around trying to attack everything they see? Probably not. Most dogs have not been through that much traumatizing situations. I've had dogs come in that literally had cigarette burns all over their bodies because the last person, before the dog was rescued, literally put out its cigarette on the dog. And yet a lot of those dogs, as terrible as that is, that dog can learn to trust me because I approach the dog in a quick way. The vast majority of people who are listening to this call do not have dogs who have been through that amount of traumatizing, experiences, and yet, these dogs are able to trust and to be able to come through those things so quickly if you're doing the right thing. So move past some of the things that you think may have happened to the dog and move forward, showing them that there's a better way, and don't let them get away with stuff when they're transitioning from fear into that cocky, arrogant, I'm just going to run around and freak out at everything. That behavior should not be allowed. And the last one, number 5, use resources to motivate your dog. One of the things that all dogs have in common that a lot of people miss is every dog needs to eat. But a lot of people, when they're using positive methods, they use praise, affection, they use toys, which those are great things to be using in training, and I do as well too. But a lot of people, when we're talking about using food type motivators, they use treats. And for me, I actually use the dog's dog food because I know that at some point, if a dog is stressed out about, being in a room with somebody that they don't know, for example, no amount of treats is going to get the dog over that level of fear. But if I use their food and I eliminate the treats, if I put them into a stressful situation that they're uncomfortable with and they're not willing to take their food, I can just take the food away. They get hungry. I try it again another, 8 or 12 hours or whatever. At some point, they're going to get hungry and they're going to get over it because they understand now this is the only way that I eat. Unfortunately, treats can easily be disregarded because if the dog gets 2 square meals a day with absolutely no stress, why would they want to go through stress in order to get a treat that's, kind of interesting to them? So using food, using resources is really big thing that I've been trying to solidify with, dog trainers around the world. A lot of people are catching on to this, and, I was taught this by Duke Ferguson, who was my mentor years ago, and it's been a huge game changer for me, especially when you're dealing with a fearful dog.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. And you're not talking about like having to, spend all day doling out food for your dog, for example, right? No. This can be like really simple, few minutes even practices around the meal service. It's just about strategizing what the dog's state of mind is and what you're exposing them to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's not about doing it for a long period of time. For me, it's like, okay, so this person's going to come in, and I know that's going to create anxiety in you, but I want you to come over to me and build a positive association, knowing that, every time somebody walks through that door, you're going to get food, right? It's not about doing it for 15 minutes. It's about, okay, somebody's coming in, come and get your food. If they don't take the food is gone. That's it. Like, it's done in 3 seconds, right? If they're willing to do it, you can do a few repetitions. There's protocols that I've developed specifically on that. I'd be more than willing to share those protocols with people if they want to send me an email. But yeah, it's not about doing it, doing a lot. This is one of the things that my clients love about my training programs. It hardly takes any time because almost everything that I do with my clients is just changing what they're already doing. Okay, so your dog is freaking out when somebody comes to the door. Well, you're already spending time with your dog at the door when somebody comes over for coffee. Well, let's just change the way that your dog reacts when people come over. It's not like you're spending extra time. You're already taking your dog for a walk. He's reacting now. Okay, let's just change it. So you go for a walk. You're already investing that time, but now you don't have to worry about the reactivity. So that's one of the great things is not looking at it as this huge time investment. You're already spending time with your dog. Let's just use that more effectively.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for people to understand, especially if they're in a really tough situation, feeling super weary and, kind of riding that line of, can I really handle this dog? Is it really right for me to keep on working at it? Maybe they've tried other training methodologies and they're just not getting the success like you alluded to in your own experience. And I had in my own, dog stories in the past as well. So yeah, I really, really want folks to hear that and to feel encouraged that, these are solutions that are really practical and they're just about shifting your awareness, is really what Ted is highlighting, like shifting your awareness and how you recognize those moments that are really stacking up for your dog and communicating the right stuff. On that note, I would love for you to share just a little bit more before we wrap on the flip side of that and corrections, because I think that's really important for those same dog owners to have not just permission, but to know that this is really necessary in certain dynamics in particular to interrupt where things are at. And, to give people something tangible as an action plan, to walk away with from our call, what's a really, good way for them to think about healthy and fair corrections for a dog who's struggling with attitudinal stuff or even fear?
Right. So when it comes to corrections, I'm a big advocate for people aligning themselves with a trainer that can kind of understand what they're doing there. Obviously, just going out there and deciding, okay, well, I'm going to do this. Like, there's so many different tools and techniques. Don't ever hesitate to contact a trainer and you find multiple trainers if you need to that are willing to kind of do that thing with you. For me, any type of correction, there needs to be kind of like a couple different things, right? So number one, with correction, the dog has to understand how that pressure turns on, right? So what behavior it did to start the correction. And then it needs to understand how to turn off that pressure, right? So a lot of dog trainers call this pressure on, pressure off. And then they also need to understand how to avoid that pressure in the first place. And that usually happens organically because if they understand how to turn off, then they can go, okay, well, if I don't do that behavior in the first place, it never happens, right? So understanding how to turn on the pressure, how to turn off the pressure, and how to avoid the pressure. If your dog doesn't understand those concepts, if you put them into a highly stimulating situation and then you start using corrections, it's not going to work because they're not going to understand, what they're doing is wrong. They're not going to be clear-headed. They're not going to be able to change their behaviors in the future. So I typically suggest if you are going to use some sort of correction or pressure, you want to be teaching those concepts in a scenario that's not overwhelmingly stimulating to the dog, or else it's going to be very hard to generalize and transition that into other scenarios. So a lot of times where I teach that oftentimes is actually I teach a command called place, which a lot of trainers do. And basically what I do is I train them, let's say I'm going to be using an e-collar, then I train them just low-level continuous on the e-collar. When they leave the place, I hold down the button, and when they go back, I release the button. And then they figure out after, a few repetitions, okay, well, if I just stay on the place, then I don't feel the pressure in the first place. For anybody who doesn't know what we're doing here, it's not uncomfortable to the dog. It's not hurting them. They're not vocalizing or anything like that. It's very, very mild. They can barely even feel it. But that shows them the concept of pressure on, pressure off, and how to avoid it. And then you can start to generalize it towards more distractive environments. For example, maybe you use the same tool for leash training. Your dog is pulling on a leash, so then you start adding the pressure when they're pulling. When they stop pulling, you release the pressure, and then they figure out, well, if I don't pull in the first place, the pressure never happens. Maybe the next transition is, okay, well, when I'm off leash, if I don't come, then, the pressure turns on. When I start coming towards mom, the pressure turns off. And if I just come the first time, the pressure never happens. So getting people to understand those core concepts is really critical, but I always say you need to be fair with your dog when you're going to be using these things, because if I was in their point of view and somebody was just archaically saying, okay, well, I'm just going to do this without giving me any feedback, I'd be so lost, and it would really erode the relationship that I have with the human,
Yeah, definitely. I think your answer is spot on and really, really helpful for people. You aren't expected to know, guys, exactly how to do these things to be a dog trainer. If you get a dog that's, putting you to the test and really presenting a lot of challenge, definitely get some support and professional help and really have a plan and a process in place. But, I think just exactly what you articulated, when you do understand how to implement, those boundaries and that structure from a corrective standpoint in a way that's fair and that has intention around it, it really shouldn't be, a life-shattering, thing for your dog to go through, or for you to go through in implementing that with your dog. So just really wanted people to get that from you, which is something you really shared well as far as how to look at interrupting, current behaviors, and that you're actually building skills in the dog as a kind of a backdoor to having something else to tell them to do, and explaining, correction before actually implementing it in a heavier way. It's really, really important.
And always looking at, too, like, can I get around this? Like, do I need to implement a correction here, too, is also a really, a beneficial thing to be asking. Like, for example, with Phoenix, one of his issues was he was extremely predatory. So if I let him off leash, like, he would literally, like, I had to, like, not let him off leash, because he would, like run up a tree, pull a raccoon out of a tree and attack it. Like, what dog does that? So, the methodology I was taught was, well, if you bring some treats out with you, and then, every time he gets onto a scent like that, then call him back. But if he got, like, even remotely into that scent, there was no hearing me whatsoever, right? So there is a time and a place where, the only way I was able to get him over that is to use a correction. And obviously I showed him the whole pressure on, pressure off concept, and then we started to implement it with different things and started to generalize it towards his predatory aggression and all that good stuff. And, he got over it. At one point, he's actually lived with 3 cats. He's no longer alive now, but he lived with 3 cats. So, you can do amazing things with it, but the big thing to keep in mind is that, you got to give them the feedback that they need to know. And then I always say, you try to dance around corrections whenever you can, and then when you've tried everything that your trainer has tried everything that et cetera, then you go, okay, well, I guess the numbers are stacking up. Okay, we got to go this route, right? But if we're going to call them our best friends, I think that we at least owe them that we look at other options, like you had mentioned, kind of like giving them alternate behaviors, like, look at me or do this for me or whatever, right, rather than going just with correction. I think that's awesome. But there is a time and a place with some dogs where they need to understand this behavior equals this consequence, because no level of focus, no level of food drive, no level of treats, no level of tug toy will get a supremely predatory, aggressive dog to want to stop killing other animals. Only correction can do that. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think people will feel, really supported in hearing that is the case, particularly, coming from someone like yourself who appreciates all sides of resolving, an issue like that, and who sees it possible every day. But if you've been extremely permissive with your dog for a long period of time, and you've been trying all of these things, and the propaganda tells you that it should be working and it's not, I really am hoping that people will hear, particularly from the Summit series as a whole, that there are still solutions out there. There are still answers that need to be pursued, and, not to give up until you've exhausted all of at least these resources that we're actually, holding together for you. My goodness, it's going to be amazing for people to have, to be able to connect with. And on that note, I would love, with our last couple of minutes here, I could talk to you all day, but how can people connect with you and continue to find your materials and consult with you and work with you? Would love for you to share with folks where they can find you. And you've also got an awesome free gift for people today from the Summit that head over to your website. So if you can elaborate a little bit on what they'll find in connecting with you, that would be awesome.
Sure. So first thing I want to do is I want to thank you for having me on and for doing this, because I feel like it's going to really help people and deliver a lot of hope. And by doing something like this, you're reaching, thousands of people, and it will definitely save dogs' lives. So I just wanted to say that's really amazing that you're putting this together, and you're having so many great people on.
Thank you.
As far as it will save dogs' lives. It definitely will, which is what it's all about.
For sure. Yeah.
Team effort, which is awesome. As far as what I have to offer, if you go to my website, so my website is mangodogs.com. If you go to my website, there's also a specific link that you can go to. So it's mangodogs.com/free video. You will have access to joining my email list, so you can get updates from me. As well, at that time, I will also send you a free video so that you can check out the first DVD of my 4 DVD set that is specifically showing people how to work with reactive and aggressive dogs. So it's about an hour in length. It goes through a lot of methodology. It shows a lot of the tools that we use. And if you're interested to go from there, then you can check out our website where you can actually buy it, which is mangodogsmedia.com. But I really wanted to include that so that people can kind of get a sense for it. And if that's something that you're interested, you can go from there. As well, if you want to connect with me, I'm on Facebook. You can, look me up on my personal page. I've also got Facebook pages. So yeah, I also have a website building business for dog professionals, so dog groomers, dog trainers, doggy daycares, etc. And you can check that website out if that's something that you're interested in. The website is petprowebsites.com.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely, you guys. Head over there. Do not delay. We will link the sites underneath Ted's interview recording, so it should make it super easy for you to hop on over and cruise his site and connect with him further. If he's helped you today with this information, please don't hesitate to shoot him an email, let him know, thank him. He's calling me from out of the country. This is not easy for our trainers to do. It takes a lot of time out of their schedules, and we really are doing this because we care about creating content that's going to make an impact, that's going to really keep dogs from needing us. Honestly, we'd love to be put out of work. I think that's kind of a common thread amongst the people on the summit, and that's just the God's honest truth. While we would, certainly have to come up with other things to do with ourselves, we would gladly do it if it meant that people weren't in pain and dogs weren't dying. So please do make sure you reach out and let Ted know if he's helped you today, or if you want to, gain more insight from him in a consulting manner, or if you're local to him, do it. He's amazing at what he does, and I know he can really help you out. So thanks again, buddy. I really appreciate you taking this time and participating in this project. It's absolutely awesome to have your insight.
Awesome. And the last thing I would leave you with is, if you are struggling with your dog and you don't feel like you have a good trainer in your area, feel free to email me. My email is ted@mangodogs.com. I have a huge network of trainers around the world that I would be more than willing to try to link you up with, because my hope is always to empower people in any way that I possibly can, And just making those connections is something that I do all the time. So feel free to shoot me an email, and I would love to try to make a connection for you and get you some help.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that so much. That's going to be so cool. I can't wait to hear all the action that takes place after our interviews launch and who we're all hearing from. It's going to be great. To our listeners, I just want to let you know your next interview will be delivered to your inbox tomorrow. You have access to the interviews for just 7 days after they're released, so keep that in mind. Make sure you sit down every morning with that cup of coffee or your glass of wine in the afternoon if you're me, and get your recordings listened to. We do not want you to miss out on all this good stuff, and they will stack up quickly as the days go on. So I look forward to joining you in our next chat. Until then, I want you to remember that creating the dog of your dreams is directly related to creating the life of your dreams. Sharing a balanced life with your dog is an invitation to dream bigger and better for yourself than you may have ever thought possible. So we will say bye for now and hear you soon.